Hey, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another reinvention conversation. I have here with me Jo Renshaw, and she is my coach colleague. We are part of the same coaching school, coaching community, and we have connected and just are happy to bring this conversation to you today. So, Jo, please introduce yourself to everyone listening.
Hello, Sade. Thank you. I'm Jo Renshaw. Yeah, we are part of the same school. I think we might have even trained around about the same year. Um,
2020. I think I was 2020 September.
yeah, that's right. And I'm across the other side of the pond on the south coast of the UK. I have been a coach a little bit, started coaching a little bit before I certified, so kind of around about 2019. And I'm a general life coach. I've tried all sorts of different niches, but I've always come back to general life coaching because I've always been so fascinated at who's been sent to me. And I say that quite purposefully because obviously I go out and market myself, but I believe that the universe, God, the great spirit, whatever you want to call it, sends people to me as I get sent to them as well. So the people that find me are so broad and diverse.
Oh,
So general life coaching has been the thing that has been the kind of common thread throughout.
yeah, amazing. And I love general life coaching. Like I'm not a general life coach technically. I coach women who are dating after divorce. But what I
Mm-hmm.
find is within that, there's a lot of
Yeah,
general coaching that ends up having to happen. Like some of
yeah,
them don't have community. They lost a lot of community. So we got to work on their
right.
friendships. And some of them, it's like, oh, boundaries when you're dating. And, boundaries are
Mm-hmm.
applicable everywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
so I definitely am a huge fan of general life coaching principles. And our conversation today is really about something that applies to all of us. We're talking about reinvention,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the things you said when we were kind of prepping for this was like change is a force that can never be stopped. And I
Mm.
was like, yes, there's some days I don't like that, but that is so
Yeah,
true.
yeah. I mean, it's the one thing that we can, it's the one constant throughout all of human life, change. And I do remember thinking when I was much younger, oh, I would grow up and I would get to a point and my life would be set and then it would look a certain way. And so I was quite alarmed when it wasn't. And it became apparent to me through conversations with my father, actually, that it was going to continually change and evolve. And thank goodness for that, because I I think I have a tendency to get quite bored and I like to be challenged in my life. And oh boy, have I been challenged. So, these changes that have come in, I have learned to lean into them. And as I've matured as well, I've and with the tools of life coaching, I've learned how to make change happen on purpose, which is really cool thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. Like with change being inevitable, it's almost like we can let it happen to us. We can just let it be a thing that it happens to us, and then we're in reactive mode. Or we can accept that, hey, we're going to change physically, like, especially, women in midlife. Like those changes
Mm-hmm.
are hard and fast when you're in your
Yeah,
40s and they go on for a while. But I mean, the change applies to everyone.
yeah.
Physically, we are moving through life and we see the changes on our faces and in our bodies. We see the
Mm-hmm.
changes in our careers. And so we can just let those things happen or hide our heads in the sand, like, oh, I hope, fingers crossed, that nothing changes, which I think that
Mm.
happens to a lot of people. Or we can sort of go after the change, knowing that it's coming. Now, one thing I do want to point out, like I'm a person who has always embraced change. I love variety. I love change. I love doing different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the other end of that spectrum, and I don't know if this is something you experienced, is the ideal, having that, what my coach calls the perfectionist fantasy
I can relate to that.
of what the reinvention will look like. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, so when you had said you thought your life would be set a certain way, I never thought my life was going to be set. I thought it was going to be this like amazing, constantly fantastic adventure
Oh,
every
wow.
step of the way.
I think that yeah, what was it you just said that
The perfectionist fantasy, where it's like there's this ideal.
yeah.
So embracing change, but thinking that change is going to be like amazing, always amazing.
And I think that can come with the thought, and I'm sure a lot of people listening will relate to this. When I get there, my
Yeah.
life will be perfect.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. When I get there, my life will be perfect when I have, and it's always there's this incremental where the goalpost is always moving. And so,
Hmm.
like, really bringing that understanding of, hey, because I work with women who are, you know, high powered, they're high achieving, they're doing a lot of things. And so they embrace reinvention, but then they
Mm.
also tend to like want it hard, fast, perfect, just like me. It's interesting
Hmm.
how we attract people who are like us. And
Mm.
so finding that middle, I think a lot of the work that I've had to do, that my clients have to do, is the ability to be present. So, you had talked about making deliberate change. So we're making
Yeah.
deliberate changes on one hand, moving towards that reinvention, but then also, and I don't like the word realistic again,
Hmm.
but it's like being present. I prefer present, being
Hmm.
present with the middle of it. Like, what does that look like for you?
Mm. Well, actually, I'm right in the middle of something like that right now. It's kind of two things. I'll give you one example. So, I'm 51, so my perimenopause is a very real thing. We're in the thick of it. And at the same time, I have a grown-up daughter. She's 27. She's lived nearby. She left home when she was about 20, I think, and she's stayed nearby in town until a month ago. Oh, in fact, 2 months ago, she came to live with us for a while, and then 1 month ago, she went off traveling around the world for a year. Now, my daughter, she's my only child, and we're very, very close. We've had some, throughout our history, we had some traumatic experiences that have made us very close. And she's the apple of my eye, my best friend. And I'm so delighted that she's gone traveling, and my heart kind of misses her. But thanks to the wonder of WhatsApp video and FaceTime, we're able to talk a lot. But as she departed, I realized this is a really crucial moment for me to lean into a moment of change on purpose, because I now have the opportunity to reinvent myself as the next version of me, a woman with a grown-up adult daughter who's left home, and I wonder what that's going to look like on the other side. And
Yeah.
how can I be a really good friend to myself as I move through this moment? And I decided that I wasn't going to rush it, because it was not going to happen overnight. When I've been a mum for nearly 28 years. I cannot change that identity overnight. That is going to take some time, and I'm always going to be a mum, and just a different version of it. And what was so fascinating was we dropped her off at the airport on Monday night. And when we drove home, I felt so at peace. I thought, I've given this human being the most incredible grounding foundation for her life that I could have done. And I felt so proud of myself. And I thought, now this is time for me. And when I woke up the next morning, those little moments when you just start to become conscious and the brain starts to get active. And my brain, like many other people's, has a tendency toward anxiety and quite negative thinking. And if I'm not onto it, as I begin to get conscious in the morning, it starts to assault me, I think is the word I would use. And I thought, I'm going to be ready for this because it's going to have a go tomorrow morning. And this is what I mean by being deliberate with it. So I set myself up the night before. It's these incremental moments that lead to the bigger picture change. So I went to bed thinking, I'm going to be ready for this in the morning. And sure enough, in the morning, I had this sensation of emotion come over me. And my
Mhm.
brain started saying, oh, she's gone. She's gone. Who are you without her? And one side of my brain went, your life is over without her now. What's the point for you?
Mhm.
And I was able to look at it with my experienced coach brain and say, oh, you cheeky thing.
Yep.
You cheeky thing. That's like, yeah, bullshit. We can go down that road if you want, but I'm not going down that road with you. Off you go. And so
Yeah.
I answered that question and I said, I'm going to tell you who I am without her. I'm still Joe. I'm
Yeah.
now the mother of a grown up daughter. And I told that story in a different way to what my brain wanted me to tell it. So
Yeah.
we can either go the way of the brain, just let things happen on default, or the way that we want it to go. I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert who talks in that amazing book, Big Magic.
Magic, yeah.
She gives this lovely analogy of like fear can be in the car with you. It can sit next to you, but it cannot take the wheel of the
Yeah.
car. You can't let it drive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
100%.
sometimes we think these moments of this process of change is kind of very slow moving, but it happens in those very incremental little moments. And I know that that was like a trajectory point for me to send me off on a different route. Had I not taken that, we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I love that you're pointing out the moments because we do have that thought that like, okay, it's going to be this big, I'm going to rebrand myself as empty nester, but it's not, I mean, and that can be part of it too. There can be a moment of decision and a moment of clarity and revelation and like deciding, but the change, the building blocks of it, like you said, happen in the moment, like in moment by moment. And this is what I tell my clients. I'm like, you have to start catching yourself. You have to,
Mm.
like you said, you can't let your brain take the wheel. But if you're on autopilot, if you're living life on autopilot, your brain is
Mm-hmm.
probably at the wheel and you didn't even notice.
This is a thing, right? We don't notice so much of the time.
Yeah, so I always tell my clients self-awareness is going to be the first thing. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and when I say self-awareness, we most of my clients already come with a huge amount of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that like, oh, in the moment. Oh, this is what it sounds like when my brain is getting anxious. This is what it sounds like, or what it feels like. I use my emotions as a wait, and I want you to talk about this too. I use my emotions as like the compass. Okay, there
Mm-hmm.
it is. Because sometimes I'll be working or I'll be talking or walking, and then this little emotion will just flip by, and I'm like, wait, what was that?
Mm.
Something happened, and
Yeah.
I know my brain had a thought and I'm right now I'm usually a little better at least catching the general gist of what's going on. But back in the day, I would have to like sit with the emotion for like a day or two and say,
Mm.
what happened? Where did this come from? Because it was just I had been on autopilot for the first, 35 years of my life. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
a deliberate act to learn to catch the little moments and then make a different set of decisions.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Well done. Yeah. That is a really useful cue when you feel an emotion in your body.
Yeah. And
Usually.
you had talked about how we have to learn to process like emotions along the way, or like in
Mm.
reinventing. Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So emotions, energy in motion, cause via thought in our brain. And I, what I have understood now that I've come away a bit like you from the perfectionist fantasy, is that over there where I want to get to isn't going to be this amazing feeling land. Life isn't going to be perfect over there, which doesn't also mean it's going to feel awful over there. It just will feel some flavor of something different than we have right now. But in between where I am now and where I want to be are a series of obstacles. And overcoming
Mm,
those brings up difficult feeling emotions because we're faced with thoughts. So if the example I love to give is running a marathon. If I've never run a marathon before and I want to run a marathon, I have to figure out or understand that there's going to be lots of obstacles between the start line and the finish line, or even before the start line, before from signing up to the finish line. And one of those obstacles might be uh, the pain one feels at 16 miles in your quads. Right? Now,
Mhm.
on race day, when you get to 16 miles and your quads start hurting, what are you going to do? Are you going to quit and leave the race? Or are you going to start talking to yourself in a way that is encouraging and saying, come on, girl, you've only got 10 miles left to go. This
Mm,
hurts temporarily, but it will feel so sweet when you have crossed the line, you've got a medal in your hand.
yeah.
And so I think so many things that we're trying to do to reinvent ourselves in our own life are like running a marathon. And there are difficulties along the way and problems that we hadn't anticipated.
Yep.
And we can either quit and go, oh well, it wasn't for me anyway, or
Mm,
lean into that difficult emotion. So maybe it's fear, or that we're going to fail, or anxiety that it's not going to be quite as we imagined, or anxiety that someone else might have thoughts about it, right? And try and derail us. And holding that space for ourselves. And by holding space, I mean allowing ourselves to feel the emotion without trying to keep everybody else happy, without trying to quit, without going and eating a load of cake to make ourselves feel better. Like
doesn't help the
really,
marathon.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. So I'll give you another story from my life, and it's how I got to coaching. So I learned about coaching, thought this is something I really want to do. And if I want to have a business coaching people on this amazing thing called Zoom, which we were just learning about kind of like around about 2017, I was doing things on Zoom a little bit with people. I wanted to have a business that looked like not the job I was doing at the time, not getting on a train to London, not sitting in a dark studio. I wanted to be on the beach. I wanted to be seeing clients on all over the world. And I had this light bulb moment, and I thought, in order to do that, I have to stop doing what I'm doing currently. I
Mm,
can't create this business of my dreams if I'm getting on a train to London and at 6 o'clock in the morning and getting home at 8 o'clock at night. So I need to take some time out in order to build this business because it's not going to happen overnight. So I'll go and wait tables for a couple of years. And in those 2 years, I'll like waiting tables. I just turn up at my job and leave my job. There's no emails and emergency phone calls at either side of those hours. I can coach people on my days off. I can write newsletters. I can do Instagram posts. So I can start building before I actually open my doors like fully for business. And my brain thought, oh, waiting tables will be easy because I just turn up and do my job. Oh, wow. Have you waited tables?
I have not, for a very good reason. I have my kids have, and they have told me all about it. And no, it's not for
It's
me.
hard work. It's hard work. And about a month in, I was like, Jeepers, am I going to be doing this for 2 years? And I had to keep coming back to why I was doing it. And this is, I think, the really important thing is to know what your reasons are for wanting to reinvent yourself. And so often, and I bet you've seen this a lot in your clients as well. So many people tell me they want to reinvent themselves because they don't like their current life.
Hmm.
So they say to themselves, I'm going to go and make this amazing life for myself because the life I have right now is so bad. And I would say to them, I love that you want to create a new life for yourself, but do you see that you're doing it against your old life? And
Hmm.
if we do things against one version of something, that the energy of that is going to be carried through.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work I do is help people clean up what the things they weren't happy about first, and then
Yeah.
find the reasons for the new life that they love that pull them forward this way rather than being pushed against what they didn't want.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important with, the people I work with who like just done with a divorce and now wanting a new partner. And there's a
Mm.
lot of that, like, I don't want this. And
Mm.
their partner list consists of everything they did not like about their last partner.
Right. How
And they think
fascinating.
this is the man. I'm like, no, like you're so anchored into the old relationship, you're actually more likely to recreate it because your mental
Mm.
and emotional anchor is that relationship. And you think you're going to create something different, but your subconscious is anchored into the old one. And
Mm.
what I generally recommend that they do is to tell a different story. And it doesn't have to be a completely different story, but we find the places where the story of their marriage was different from the overarching story they've been telling. Like I remember one
Mm.
client, she had this story, and I said, but who were you in that marriage? Like, yeah, the marriage was terrible and all these things happened and he was narcissistic and all these bad things happened. And I was like, but who were you? I was like, I bet you were a
Mm.
badass in that relationship.
Mhm.
And she was like, yes, I did this, I did that, I did that, I achieved this. And all of a sudden, that little opening of the amazing things she accomplished in spite of her partner's behavior was just enough to change the story of her first marriage. So it wasn't
Mm.
this terrible, horrible thing that had happened to her, taking away the
Mm.
first 40 years of her life, and now she was starting from zero. It was more like,
Mm.
oh, this is who I am. And look at
Mm.
what I did in this really challenging environment. What can I do now? And that
Amazing.
just flipped everything around in her thinking about who she wanted to partner with and how she wanted to date and how she wanted to make dating a part of her life. And yeah, so I agree that's really important, which brings me to two things. One thing that you had mentioned earlier was okay, so I forgot that one. But let's talk about the self-concept, like just kind of like with what happened with my client. Who do we think we are? Oh, now I remember the first one. Okay, I'm going to go back to it because it's kind of like the foundation of this. It's that belief. So you had talked about, when you're at 16 miles, are you going to quit? Right? When you're feeling the pain in your quads. There is a little piece that I think sometimes people miss, especially when reinvention for them is like this big, giant declaration, is sometimes there's that tiny little voice way down deep inside that tells them, oh, you can't do it or you won't do
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And sometimes the big, bold, loud reinvention statement is sort of to cover that up and drown it out.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
when things get hard, the voice is like, you tried to drown me out, but now I'm coming out in full force. And I think I've learned, and it's a little bit of a challenging concept to explain to my clients because they really don't want to engage with that voice early on,
Mm. Mhm.
right? And so I'm like, listen, everybody's brain does this. Let's talk to the part of you that may not think you can do this
Mm.
so that we can bring it along. We know what it's saying, we know what its fears are. I call it flipping fears. Let's bring all the
Mm.
fears out on the table instead of pretending
Mhm.
they're not there. And
Mm.
let's almost like mitigate the risk. What is your brain afraid of? Is it afraid you won't achieve it? Okay, so what's so bad about it if you don't achieve it? And then we get to the real problem before it becomes a boulder that really stops them along the way.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I heard another story. I think somebody shared something that Byron Katie had said that when we set a goal and that's this big reinvention statement, all of our stuff comes up. And I think it was Byron Katie who said it's like you take a glass out of the cupboard, it's been sitting in there a while, and you can't see that there's like dust and stuff
Mhm.
in the bottom of the glass. But when you pour the water in, which is the goal, the thing you want to do, it brings all the stuff up to the top. And I think the solve for that is just to keep pouring more of yourself
Yeah.
in so that it overflows and the stuff
Yes.
washes away anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Like keep like see it, be like, oh, look at all this dust. Don't just
Mm.
drink it with all the dust on top of it.
Mhm.
Right. Don't pretend it's not there. Just be like, you know what? The answer to this is changing, is continuing the change, continuing
Yeah.
um, to change my thinking. Like you had said, you couldn't create your business by continuing to do what you were doing before. And similarly
Hmm.
with our thinking, we can't create this new life thinking the way we were
Yeah.
thinking old life.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that to add to that as well, when the going is tough, when we're in the process of change, what's tougher is staying still. What makes things easier is keeping momentum and getting momentum again and again and again. And to come back to the marathon analogy, we're required to do that multiple times based on how far away or how big the goal is that we want to achieve and the reinvention that we want to create for ourselves, to keep
Yeah.
picking ourselves up. And that takes a real act of commitment to yourself, compassion for yourself, because there's going to be times when you feel like hell, and there's self-blame and self-doubt, and all of that comes up. So can you talk to yourself like a friend throughout the process of that as well?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I actually got coached by my coach Cara Lowenthal this week on
Oh.
I got coached by her this particular one I got coached by her last week. And we were talking about like sort of like the fuel for my motivation for my goals, you know. And now I was raised in a conservative culture, religious culture, puritanic influences on the culture,
Right.
right? All
Interesting.
and she was saying, you were raised in a culture that believes that you're inherently bad and lazy. And
Hmm.
so she said, is it possible that you don't believe that if you chill out, you will achieve? I was like, well, I think that's a huge possibility is that with that conditioning and that societal programming, there's a part of me that believes that if I just chill out a whole lot, then I won't do the things that I want to do. I won't do the things that I need to do. I won't serve. I won't contribute, which there's zero evidence over my lifetime
Hmm.
that that is
Yeah.
true. But those are thinking processes. So there is that part of, having that compassion for
Hmm.
ourselves and then believing like that self concept. How do we think about ourselves? How do we talk to
Mm.
ourselves? How do we
Mm.
cheer ourselves on to keep going in the reinvention? So yeah, that's huge. And I think it's a lifelong. I know I am in well, one, maybe two versions of a reinvention right now, and probably
I
been in one for the last 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's kind of multiple ones going on, aren't there, within
Yeah,
us at the same time.
yeah. So I was going to ask you, what are some ways for us to make this reinvention not this hard slog, painful
I
journey? How can we make it fun and
I
energizing?
it Yeah, I think first of all, knowing your why, like knowing why you want to do it and having a vision for yourself and being unattached to that vision as well. And the reason for that is because that's a hair's breadth away from perfectionist fantasy. So
Hmm.
a vision and perfectionist fantasy, we just want to keep that awareness of like, oh, which way are we going with that one?
Yeah.
So yeah, knowing our why and deciding that we're gonna that it's a done deal. Because I think when we name that version of ourselves, that reinvention, that goal, it is done in the world. And then we can kind of let go of that. And something else that I always recommend is to trust yourself along the way. Like to trust that and also that you're not doing it on your own. Like this amazing thing called life and the universe has got your back and
Yeah.
is nudging you all the way. And you might have some surprising turns along the way. So don't be surprised about the surprising turns too, which is hard when you're in it. But if you can keep half a foot in a place of like, oh, I'm doing this on purpose, and this is one of those surprising turns that I'm not surprised about.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's the place where you say, and I heard this from a fellow coach, this is the part where or this is the part where this happens. Right. Like
Hmm.
if you can see the reinvention as like this book, this journey that you're on, and not staying out of a perfectionist fantasy, being like, okay, there's gonna be stuff along the way. And then when the stuff actually shows up, being like, this is the part where something I didn't
Mm,
anticipate happened.
yes.
Like really reframing all of the hard moments,
Hmm.
but also enjoying the good moments. Like
Yeah.
staying present enough to enjoy, because the good moments become fuel. They become the energy and the confirmation of the why. Like I wanted to go on this journey because there was going to be growth, or I wanted to go
Yeah.
on this journey because there was going to be amazing people along the way. I mean, one of the reasons I love
Yeah.
coaching is just because it brought me into a world of sort of like people who were different from the people I was engaging with on a regular basis before I became a coach.
Hmm.
Right. And so when you and I are having this conversation, or when I'm on a podcast with someone, or when I'm coaching a client, it's like, oh, this is the part where I get to have this amazing conversation with people from all over the world and
Yeah.
learn and share. And then when the hard things happen, like if, I'm on a sales call and the person is like, yeah, no, I don't want to buy today.
Mm,
This is the part where someone says no to my offer.
yeah. 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 And how are we going to treat ourselves within that
Yeah.
failure, if you like, that loss?
Yes.
Something else I really like to do is time traveling. So when I recognize that I'm in the thick of it, is to just stick my head up and look in two directions down the timeline. So I go to the future and look back.
Okay.
And as I look back from that place of having got to the place I want to be, I can look at myself and go, oh, bless you. I see it's really hard right now, but keep going. And also from where I am in the present to look back at where I was, say, maybe 3, 5, 10 years ago and be, wow, you've already
Yes.
done this process. So you know how to do it.
Yes, yeah. And even in areas where like I mean like I think about that when I think about my divorce and everything that I went through with that, and I'm like I'm still amazed. I'm like, "Oh my God, like my life is so like night if there's something more a starker contrast than night and day, like my life is a stark contrast from um pre-divorce, and it's just like, "Oh my gosh, like that girl," and I'm always like, "Listen," like, I always try to stay connected to her because I was like, "Listen, I'm coming for you."
Yes. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
and
yeah.
being able to be proud of all of that growth and also drawing strength from it, because I think looking at what I was able to do, some of the crazy
Hmm.
things, I'm like, "Girl, you can do anything." If you were able to,
Hmm.
you can do anything.
Right. I think that's a really good phrase to say to yourself. If you can do that, you can do anything. And
Yeah.
I have said this to many, many mothers. If you can push a baby out, don't tell me you can't do this thing that you're trying to do now.
That's very real. That is very, very real. Like, yeah, like that's oh my God. Thinking about my kids are grown now and I am not. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm glad that's that,
Yeah.
especially pushing the baby part out. I'm glad that's oh, amazing, Joe. This was such a great conversation. So I
Yeah.
will sort of let you, if you just wanted to give like anyone who's thinking about a reinvention, they're thinking about changing. And I know a lot of people are thinking about changing careers right now. Just, things in the world are so different. And there's so much opportunity. I know some
Mm,
people are working on changing their relationships. I have women constantly talking to me about finding a new relationship or creating a different kind of relationship. Like, what's your overall, like, if you just had like a little piece of wisdom for someone who's considering a reinvention or someone who's in the middle of a reinvention, what would it be?
mm. A little piece of wisdom for someone who's considering a reinvention would be a phrase I heard that your new life is going to cost you your old life. And so as you walk towards your new life, your old life might burn down in flames, and it's supposed to. we want this to happen. This is a good thing.
Oh,
Nothing
wait.
has gone wrong when that happens.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And that is so true. And I don't know anyone who has, shifted in ways that were significant to them that wasn't true of. I think that's always is always true. There's, like you said, it's going to cost you your old life,
Hmm. Yeah.
and really coming to the place of willingness to let go of the old life, even something as simple as being the person who is loved for everything they do for others.
Hmm.
I know
Hmm.
a lot of women in midlife where that is the old life that they're struggling to let go of. If you want to build a business and you are the person in your friend group, in your family, in your extended family, in your workplace who makes everybody happy and gets
Hmm.
everything done, you can't build something. You have no bandwidth. And so
Yeah.
sometimes the old life that we're letting go of isn't something external. It's not a spouse or a house or anything. It's these internal processes that we've built up and
Yeah.
we get our significance and identity from. So that's so
Yeah.
profound.
It's a self concept, isn't it?
Yes. Ooh, that one hit me. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
The new life will potentially cost you your old self-concept.
Yeah. Very
Yeah,
much. Very
that's a
much.
good one. Joe,
Yeah.
thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I feel like I've gotten to know you so much more in the last 45 minutes. If for people, I know for those of you watching, I guess both on Facebook and LinkedIn, the links to connect with myself and Joe will be right above the video. But Joe, please tell everyone who you work with, what kind of work you do, and what they can come to you for.
Yeah. So I coach people on all sorts of subjects, relationships, parenting, money, over drinking, trying to lose weight, all the subjects. And the kind of people that come to me are very diverse and broad. From many, many mothers in their 40s do come to me. But I also seem to have a lot of men in their 70s referred to me, which is so fascinating to me. And they have amazing results. So, um, yeah, I have a 12-week one-to-one program, and I'm just about to start a group program in on the 11th of November, a 6-week group program called How to Be Your Own Best Friend. And that's the overarching theme of what I teach. It's called How to Be Your Own Best Friend. So in that, I teach the foundational processes, the foundational tools that you need to know before you can even think about falling in love with yourself. Because there's a lot talked about self-love. But if we don't know ourselves and like ourselves and trust ourselves first, then
Mm,
falling in love with ourselves is a bit of a ways off. So I do
yeah.
all that groundwork with people first.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And that's so huge for any change that we're looking for. You
Mhm.
have to be your own biggest cheerleader, champion, advocate. Because you're with you.
Yeah,
You're a team with yourself moving
yeah,
forward. All right. So everyone
yeah.
listening, if any of that sounds like something you want to do, please reach out to Joe. And for those of you who are new to me, again, I'm Shadi Curry. I am a dating coach for divorced women. So if you are considering a divorce, if you have completed a divorce, you're rebuilding after a divorce, or you are looking for a new partner after a divorce, I coach on all of those subjects. I am currently enrolling people in the Dating After Divorce Academy, which is a 1-year membership group program. And we cover all of these subjects. We cover the overarching reinvention after a divorce that includes finding the partner that you want after a divorce. And that, again, letting go of the past is a
Hmm.
huge part of that, reconnecting with yourself in the present, dating with your core values, which is just really getting to know who you really are so that that becomes the anchor for what you build in the future. The Dating After Divorce Academy is currently open. I do still take a few one-on-one clients, so you can ask me about that if that's what you're interested in. But either way, we would love to connect with you. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have comments or questions, you can put those below the video, and one of us will reach out and answer your question. Right. I think we're going to wrap it up. Joe, thank you so much for your time. And
My
everyone,
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again.
I love that.
All right. Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.